All right, so it's been brought to my attention that the last video was messed up a little bit. For some reason, the recording that usually happens, I was having trouble with it in the beginning. After I paused it, it shut it off. And then the second recording, like even now when I go to look at it, I don't even have it saved to the website anymore. So it seems like there's this issues with this. And I must have pressed pause when I meant to not press pause. So I'm going to do the problems that weren't covered in that last video so you can watch them here. All right, so for this one, remember the first thing you're going to have to do is determine, are these similar? So the answer would be yes or no. If it's no, then there's nothing else you have to do. If it's yes, then you have to explain one of these two. It either needs to be that all of the angles are congruent or just two pairs, depending on what you show me, or all the sides are proportional. If you do not show that part of your work, then you will not get full credit on this question. So when we look here, we see that angle L is in both the bigger and the smaller triangle. And now if we take these two lines and extend them a little bit, so we're going to draw them past our triangle so we can maybe see this a little clearer. And then we go ahead and take this side and we extend this. And you could have extended the other side. It didn't have to be just this one. But we can see clearly now that these blue lines are parallel lines and this green is our transversal. And these are in the same spot of our intersection, the bottom left. So that means that they need to be equal to each other. So I can stop now and say, yes, two pairs of angles are congruent. Right? If you went ahead and showed that these are also congruent by the same corresponding angles, then you can say all angles are congruent. But once you get two, you can stop there. You don't have to do any more. All right, now the last thing you would have to do is you have to finish a similarity statement. Now, one question you will have to finish it, and the other question you will have to come up with your own. So I'm going to erase this so we can see the triangles a little bit better, just the lines. I'm not going to erase the arc marks. All right, so LMN. So we went from the angle that they shared to the two arc marks down to the three. So with the smaller one, we need to go the angle that they share to the two arc marks down to the three. So it'll be triangle L, can't see that letter, LBA. All right, so I'm going to skip the other ones that were covered in the other video, and I'm going to go straight to number 16. Actually, I did 16, so I'm going to move on to 17. All right, so for here, first thing you have to identify is it says the top of a coffee table and the top of a dining table are similar in shape. The dining table is 1.35 meters long and has an area of 0.9 meters squared. So that means the area for this figure is equal to 0.9 meters squared. Right, that is the area to our coffee table or to our dining table, the bigger table. And it says calculate the area of the coffee table. So what does this area equal to? All right, well, what we have to do first is look at what sides they give us. If you notice, this one's in centimeters and this one's in meters, so we need to convert and put them into the same units. So I'm going to convert the centimeters into meters because that's what the area is given to me here. So this is going to be equal to 0.9 meters. All right, so we're no longer going to use the centimeters. So what we need to do first is we need to identify our similarity ratio between the two sides that are given. So we can do 0.9 divided by 1.35. Well, 0.45 goes into both of these, so that would be equal to 2/3. Right? But we're dealing with our area, and our area is our units squared. So we need to go ahead and square this ratio. And this will give us the ratio of 4/9. So that means the ratio for our area of the two figures is 4/9. Well, this 0.09 is the area for the larger figure, so that needs to go on the bottom. And then the area for the smaller figure is what we don't know, and that will go on the top. We cross multiply, so this will give me 9a is equal to 4 times 0.9, which is going to give me 3.6. All right, then we will go ahead and divide each side by this 9. And that means A is then equal to 0.4. So our area of the smaller figure, the coffee table, is 0.4 meters squared. If you do not write your meters squared, you will lose a point. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, this one is talking about the volume. So it says the diagram opposite shows a pair of similar fruit bowls. The smaller bowl has a volume of 1,400 centimeters cubed. So I'm going to go ahead and I will write that the smaller bowl has a volume that is 1,400 centimeters cubed. All right, so we know that volume. It says find the volume of the larger bowl. Well, what we need to do first is identify the size. So it's giving us the width of each bowl. And we know that they're similar. So we can go ahead and create a similarity ratio. And it doesn't matter if you go bigger to smaller or vice versa, but I'm going to go 30 to 15. So I'm going from the bigger bowl to the smaller. This reduces to 2/1. Now our units for volume is equal to units cubed. So unlike with the area, we need to cube our volume. Well, 2 cubed is equal to 8, and 1 cubed is still 1. Right? Then we need to go ahead and set it equal. So the volume of the smaller figure is 1400. Well, since this is our smaller figure down here, the volume needs to go in the bottom. All right? The volume of a larger bowl, we don't know. And now this one's nice and easy because when we cross multiply, it's going to give us our V right away, and we don't have to worry about dividing anything. And 1400 times 8 is 11,200 centimeters cubed. Once again, if you do not put the proper units, you will not get full credit for this. You will lose points. All right, but that is solving for this. So when you're dealing with your volume, we need to cube our similarity ratio. And when we're dealing with our area, we need to square it. All right, so just remember the units that we're dealing with is what we're doing to our similarity ratio. All right, there's one more question with the proof. That's it for this video. All right, when you go to do a proof, remember I said that you should use 2 different colors. And before you do this, let's look at what we're asked to prove. Well, we're asked to prove that these 2 angles are congruent. So I want to be able to show that D and C are congruent. Well, anytime I have 2 triangles and I'm trying to show that an angle or side is congruent, I first usually need to show that the triangles are congruent. Because without that, there's nothing that we can say about these angles unless they're vertical or alternate interior, which in this case they're not. Right? So we need to prove the triangles are congruent. So what I'm going to go through is mark all the given information in black. So AE is congruent to BE and DE is congruent to EC. And then I will mark any of the information that I know that is factually correct with blue. And I know these 2 angles have to be congruent because they're vertical. So now I stop and pause for a second and say, wait a minute, do I have enough information for me to say the triangles are equal or congruent? And yes, by side angle side. So I can say side angle side. And by showing that, I can then show that all of my corresponding parts will be congruent. So I developed my plan. I know everything I need to speak about because I drew it on my triangle. And now this is easy to do. All I have to do is write about every single tick mark and every single arc mark that I did. So it's really simple if you just draw it out. We're already doing proofs. We just weren't writing all of our reasons and statements out step by step, but you were supposed to be writing these arc marks. You're supposed to be writing these tick marks. So that was justifying that you knew everything. All right, so the very first statements that we ever write are given. So when you have multiple given statements, you can write them under the same number. You don't have to write like number 1 and number 2. You can write number 1, and then you can just write your 2 given statements, or 3 or 4, or however many are given to you. Right, make sure you're numbering your statements and your reasons together so that way I can follow along with what you're doing. Right, so that is given. Right, now I'm going to go ahead and move on to what we knew. So I talked about this side because I said it's congruent. I talked about this side because I said they're congruent. So I'm going to also go ahead and mark them off that I talked about these sides here. So I'm already labeling everything I talked about. The last thing I need to discuss in order for me to say the triangles are congruent is this angle. And the angle is this one here, AED. So I can say our second statement is that angle AED is congruent to this angle BEC. Remember, you do not have to write your angles in corresponding order because angle BEC and angle CEB are the same thing anyway. So it doesn't really matter if you write which in order you go. It only matters when you're doing your congruent triangles, right? And our reasoning for this was the vertical angles theorem, right? You needed to have or know that they were vertical angles, and that is our vertical angles theorem. Now, once we did this, we now talked about the angle, and we talked about these angles here, so we discussed everything. So now we can say that the triangles are congruent. So triangle AED. Now, this is where it needs to be corresponding. So this one went from 1 arc or 1 tick mark to 2. So we need to go from 1 to 2 as well. So it will then be triangle BEC. All right, and now our reasoning for this was our side angle side that we already established here. And then the last thing is your last statement. Once we said that the triangles were congruent, we said that we would be able to say the angles are. Well, if we notice, D and C are in the same position, and when 2 figures are congruent, we know by their congruency statement that our corresponding parts are congruent as well. So now our last statement, we can write what we are asked to prove, that angle D is congruent to angle C. And then our reasoning for this is CPCTC, which this stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, you can write it out if you truly, really want to. You can write it out, or you can just go ahead and put the abbreviation. All right, I apologize for the mess up on the first one, but I have it done now. It seems like you guys stay up till 3:30 in the morning anyway. So hopefully you guys are using this and studying.